Some sense of what live healthcare is, because that'll put the examples into some context. Some of the challenges that I've experienced in the last 4 years, because I thought I'd use real live examples to show the pressure that leaders get put under and the techniques and tricks that you use in circumstances like that to actually demonstrate your own leadership capabilities and to be able to steer organizations through times of trouble. And I've titled that What You Do When You're in a Crisis, because leadership when things are easy, they're literally easy. You just move with the river and it flows along nicely. It's when it gets tough, then you get tested. And then we can have some time for some questions and answers. So in the context of what Life Healthcare is, it's a Southern African-based hospital group. It's got about 17,000 employees in it, 8,000 hospital beds. In the main, nearly 700 mental health capabilities and beds. We have rehabilitation, we have renal dialysis, we've got oncology centers. Basically, we can do anything for everyone who's sick. And you're all familiar with private healthcare. We service those people that have got medical aids, and we've got hospitals all over the country and in Botswana. A much more complicated part of our business is called life molecular imaging, and that's all in the remit of nuclear medicine. And nuclear medicine is the way of the future. It's got a lot to do with some very, very clever scientists, mainly in Germany, but we've created some unique ways of being able to identify and treat very, very difficult diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer in very different ways. The organization used to be much bigger when I joined it in 2020, which is an important year because you'll all remember that was right in the middle of COVID. We also had the largest diagnostic and imaging business in Europe, and also operated through 20 other countries around the world. We sold the business in Poland and we sold the business in India. So the organization has been through a whole heap of different challenges, not only just healthcare and sophisticated nuclear medicine, but multiple countries. And therein lies a couple of examples, which we'll get to a little bit later. So what I thought we'd do is rather just give you 4 challenges that I've experienced as the chief executive of the company, what decisions were required, and then we'll talk about what leadership attributes you can then demonstrate and use, and maybe some of those you'll take away with you and say, hang on, it's worked for Pete, maybe it can work for me. But the nice part about talking about challenges, you'll find very different ones in your own lives and the jobs you do, and you'll find very different ways of being able to do it. You can't copy leadership. You can learn, but you can't copy. You're going to be your own leader. So the first one we had was the dreaded COVID. I knew zero about healthcare. I was an accountant who arrived in a healthcare company in the middle of COVID. What challenges did we experience? They were terrible. For the first time in our lives, lockdowns. We buried 57 of our nurses. You know what it's like to go to the office and you're burying staff? That's not cool. It's terrifying. But the hospitals had to carry on operating. We're the one business in the world that operates 24/7 forever. No Christmas Day, no religious holidays, no weekends off. Hospitals never stop. So when one then starts to look at it, we then have to isolate and quarantine our own staff. Our business started to lose money, and the costs continued to escalate. If I say I was terrified, I'd be underestimating how bad I felt. You've got death, you've got a financial crisis. At that stage, we had 27,000 staff working for us, and we see 700,000 patients in a year. So you can't get chicken and turn around and say, well, this is too big for me, let someone else solve it. You actually stand in the middle of the problem. A little bit later on, we had a cyber attack. And the cyber attack just rendered our whole hospital group inoperable. All the computers failed. So one looks at it and says, Our computers stopped working. What would happen to you today if I took your phone away? There'd be a crisis. We couldn't send messages. You couldn't get you wouldn't be. I mean, I know how much pain it causes my two young daughters if the phone doesn't work or the Wi-Fi doesn't work. Now just imagine a hospital group, 27,000 people, 700,000 patients, 8,000 beds, and your computers don't work. But the hospitals still have to carry on. You can't have someone in the ICU, I'm really sick. Oh, sorry, the computers are not working today. Can you just hold off with your problem? We'll deal with you tomorrow. So what we really then ended up with was a financial crisis yet again, because we bill every single day by the hour. You stop billing, your business goes out of business. So you think, well, this is a really cool job you took. You know, COVID, cyber attack, got worse. July 2021, civil unrest across the country. How many armed guards do you see hanging around a hospital? Zero. You can't, hospitals must be accessible. Now you've got civil unrest where these very vulnerable institutions called hospitals, they've got expensive kit, they've got lots of expensive technology, they've got lots of drugs that people want, and you're exposed to a society that's basically gone out of control. Literally, things were burning. Our people were under attack. The very people that are there to save lives are now threatened by people that are trying to cause chaos inside our country. Our supplies were disrupted. Well, how difficult can that be? Well, what happens when oxygen runs out in a hospital? So the tankers that have to deliver the oxygen to the hospital in Mpangeni gets hijacked. You got people on ventilators waiting for oxygen, and your oxygen has been diverted by crooks. What do you start to do? Well, we also know that nurses couldn't get to hospitals. Why? Well, there were tires burning in roads, it was unsafe, people couldn't use public transport. So the very people that deliver care to society were prevented from getting to their place of work. And again, we started to lose money. But hospitals have to keep going. Can't just say, look, sorry about you, you're sick, but we've got civil unrest, so can you just hang on and come back in a week? Because when people end up going to hospital, it's serious. This is not a runny nose or a sore toe and I need a Band-Aid. This is normally a life or death and critical. So we got through all of those, and we'll talk about what we had to do, and then we ended up with NHI. And it's good to hear you laugh about it, because it's ridiculous. And I've been pretty outspoken, and I can afford to be, and I have to be, because you can't take the healthcare system in this country, which I must say is a brilliant healthcare system. You only have to go and live and work in another country around the world, or another series of countries, to understand how good private healthcare in this country is. And then we have NHI. And one looks at it and says, what does it cause for a business like ours to have a government start to speak about a piece of legislation that can effectively undo everything? Despite the fact that it's an enviable outcome, because no human would say we don't want to have healthcare for South African citizens. Of course we want that. And one would never argue about affordable and accessible healthcare. It's the right outcome. But there are ways and means of going about it. And a piece of legislation which didn't get collaborated with private can't be the right answer. So what did we end up with? The government committed to delivering the NHS equivalent. NHS, for those of you who want to know, is the healthcare system that sits in the United Kingdom. Can anyone guess how many citizens of the United Kingdom are on a waiting list for a procedure in a hospital run by the NHS? There's 65 million people in the United Kingdom. How many people do you think are on the waiting list? How many? It's 7.6 million people. I have a family member at the moment who's waiting for a cardioversion, which is basically, you get your heart shocked so it goes back into normal rhythm. 6 weeks. If that happened in South Africa, it'd be done in 48 hours. But no, we must have a system that now can end up with tens of millions of people on waiting lists. We've also seen that there's a huge amount of risk that comes with the proposal. All of healthcare spend is going to be directed through one government department. all of our money, which is orders of magnitude 600 billion. Not sure that's a good idea. And it's in a moment of truth where it will disrupt our business. And what's it going to do to our stakeholders, our investors? We need money to run our hospitals. If people start to see that the healthcare system is fragile, they're not going to put money into our hospitals. What then happens to Life Healthcare's hospitals? They close. And that can't be a good thing. So I've given you 4 of the crises that I've had to experience in the last 4 years. And let's now think about what needed to happen. Because it's one thing to give you a problem, but leaders can't just describe problems. You've got to fix them. Otherwise, what's your job? You're not a newspaper reporter because they tell people about problems. You've actually got to fix them. So what did we have to do? So in the context of our COVID environment, there were a couple of big decisions. One was, some of you are not going to like this, compulsory vaccination. Yo, how can you do that? Well, the maths was quite straightforward. Before the vaccine was available, we buried 57 nurses. After the vaccination, how many nurses did we bury? Give me a guess. Someone's got to pick a number. 57 before? 0 is nearly right. We buried 2. Both of them were unvaccinated. It's really sad. But the compulsory vaccination was very unpopular. We got taken to court by 7 of our head office employees because how can you tell us to do that? Well, we said, well, you work in a healthcare company. We know that we can't put our nurses into our hospitals unless they're vaccinated because there's a chance they're going to die. And why should there be a difference between people in the hospitals and people in head office? You want to work for Life Healthcare? We're all in this together. So as part of the compulsory vaccination process, who got the first jab? Me. And yeah, you look at it and say, leadership takes some courage. You can't say, look, this is a really good idea for you, but it's not such a good idea for me. We also had to delegate responsibility to our hospitals. You couldn't run everything from the center because there are too many things that happen in a hospital on a daily, hour, minute basis. You can't have them phoning head office. So delegation of authority had to take place. It's a brave decision because you're putting a new business model in place to respond to a crisis. We had to be swift and efficient, which said that you had to make decisions quickly. Sometimes you didn't know all the facts. And you'll see a little bit later on, leaders can make the right decisions with 70% of the facts, but you start to sweat because there's a 30% chance you might be wrong. But if you don't make a decision, what ends up happening? You end up with a business in real trouble. We had to make sure that we could get all the screening right. And those of you that may have had the unfortunate experience of going to hospital during COVID, that became difficult. You had to get all the tests done. And a COVID test wasn't so simple. And you probably all had something awkward shoved up your noses. It wasn't nice at all. I had to get tested 3 times a week because that's what we ended up having to do in the head office. So my nose now runs away when someone comes at me with a little thing. It's not a good idea. And then, of course, there was, we couldn't predict how many people would end up in hospital. Hospitals were overflowing. You needed to be able to accommodate people and allocating the resources, financial and people, all big decisions that had to take place really quickly. And you have to find a little bit later on, one person on their own doesn't make the decisions. In a cyber attack, well, basically we were held to ransom by crooks. If you don't pay us, you're not going to get your system back. But paying money to crooks is illegal. You can't do that. So we had to run the hospitals manually. Now just go back and think, 17,000 staff members in South Africa and you're running things manually. That's not so. Imagine your own day job that you do. We switch off your Excel spreadsheet and your email, and now you're going to write letters and you're going to do things with a calculator and you do them with a pen and paper. Now you've got to do that for 17,000 staff, 63 hospitals, 700,000 patients, and you've got to get it right. We had to reorganize all our systems. We had to run everything manually. We had to keep the company alive, and we had to get our system back. Civil unrest. What big decisions did we have to take? Again, now we've got to delegate responsibility to the hospital managers. Now you're asking the hospital managers to do things that they're not necessarily trained to do. They're not trained in logistics. You know, go and fetch the oxygen tanks, which is literally what we had to do in the Mpangeni hospital. We had to figure out a way of going to fetch our own oxygen tanks when they blockaded the is it the N3? Now we had to figure out our own plan. Again, we had to have swift and efficient responses. We had to worry about employee and doctor safety, because this was completely unpredictable. And we had to make sure that we were able to protect the premises. So now you're sitting as an executive worrying about what you do in a combat zone in order to keep your hospitals going so that you can keep people alive. It's a very, very different experience to what you would normally hope to do in a day-to-day basis in a desk job. Then you get back to the NHI. Now you've got a business that's uncertain. You need to have a brave stance. It's not easy to stand up and say to the government, we don't agree, because you're not sure what the consequences are. And in this particular context, you can then see that there were a number of things that we had to do to make sure that we were always acting in the best interests of our nurses and our doctors, which is our priority. No nurses, we haven't got a business. No doctors, you haven't got any care. So you can't let a piece of legislation get in the way that tells all of them that they should rather go and do other jobs. You've got to protect them. And we've got to explore ways and means of collaborating and ensuring the sustainability of the industry. So now the business person that has had to deal with crooks in cyber, deal with clinical crises in COVID, become like a safety officer in civil unrest, now becomes a diplomat to negotiate with government. So all of these point to a moment in time where I sign up for the job. You can't make excuses and say, well, look, this is getting a little bit too difficult, give it to somebody else. You've actually got to step up. But there are lots of ways of being able to manage through a crisis by depending on your leadership style. So the trick that I've got to deliver back to you today is I didn't invent these solutions. I learned them. So part of what you need to be thinking through as to how you manage your own careers. You've got to pick the right boss. Because I was blessed with incredible bosses. And in so doing what I learned, I was then able to transfer into this business and a chance to talk about it today. So the number one thing you've got to do when you're in a crisis, you've got to be responsible. This is not somebody else's problem. It's yours. You might not like it. You didn't wake up or sign up for it, but it's yours. So remember to be responsible. And in so doing, you're not going to be popular. I'm going to say that again. Everyone thinks chief executive job, it's lekker. You get a nice office and people take pictures of you and you get invited to speak at all these wonderful, wonderful events like we're doing today. But you're going to make decisions that are not popular. And the minute you feel like you're a popular leader, I promise you you're not doing your job properly. Because the job is not simple. You've got to consider the larger group, which means you can't have favorites. Some people are going to get angry. Like when we put compulsory vaccination in, people got like really angry. The letters that were written to me were not pleasant. What they threatened to do to me was not nice. All on the basis that why should I be telling them what to do? Well, when you're in a leadership position, that's what you're going to end up having to do. You take responsibility, you give instructions, you've got to do what's right for the country. And if you procrastinate, you're not doing your job. So how often have we seen leaders who are required to make decisions and they just kick the can down the road? Because maybe you're going to get cleverer. You're not going to get cleverer tomorrow. And the decision's not going to get easier tomorrow. So procrastination is not helpful. Bad news has to travel quickly. And what you tend to find in organizations today is people hide stuff. I don't know why they do it. Do they think it's just going to go away? The bad news has to go through the organization quickly. Otherwise, you, as the boss, can't make the call. So if people just keep telling you good news, you've lost it. You've lost your leadership momentum. People are not able to talk to you, and you're not able to make the right decision because you're not getting all the facts. So we make sure that you are accessible. That bit in the middle there is, if you remember one thing on this slide, just remember that. When you're the boss, people must be able to go to you. Because if they go to you, they engage. If they engage, they give you facts. They give you facts, you can make decisions. You must show concern. Otherwise, if you're not approachable, people are not going to enjoy engaging with you. And you must make sure that there are no impediments to the bad news getting to you. And of course, when the bad news arrives, don't set your hair on fire. Because then people are going to have an allergic reaction to you going forward. To say you can't go and tell Pete bad news because he throws chairs out the window and he screams and shouts and. You just got to be calm. Your heart rate's going to go up, but outside, you must just stay calm. You must get the facts and the details as quickly as possible. You know, don't set up a committee. Don't ask for a What do some people do when there's a problem? No, we must have a committee. Well, yeah, sometimes a committee is a good idea when you want diversity of thoughts, but not if you want them to make the decision for you. You got to learn from people that have done it before, but even the pros get complacent and lazy. Be careful. And good leadership, you got to keep learning. So by aiming to get the facts and details, you are actually learning. Because if you didn't know the stuff, now's your chance to find it out. This is probably the best part of what I would say has been a little bit of my secret to success. And that's success not meant arrogantly. For me to be able to deliver what I've been able to do, I've always picked a really good team. And I've said it a number of times all around the world. When I'm the dumbest person in the room, I've done my job. Pick people better than you. And that doesn't mean you must feel threatened. Well, you know, so-and-so is better than you and then I'm going to take your job. Fantastic. Because part of being a leader is to next fact put the next person in place. If something just collapses in a heap when you leave, you haven't done your job properly at all. In actual fact, that's a shocking state of affairs. Yes, but you know, if it looks bad after I leave, then I was really good. No, you weren't. You were pathetic. It has to be better after you go. Because you'll be remembered for what it looks like after you left, not for what it looked like when you were there. So in picking a great team, always acknowledge your best assets are your people, and you create an environment where the best and the brightest want to actually be part of what's going on. And the next piece of the puzzle is make sure it's diverse. Diversity, to my mind, and this wasn't just what I learned in Standard Bank or in Deutsche Bank or in South Africa. As the Global Chief Operating Officer for Deutsche, I had 122 countries that I was responsible for. Diversity was absolutely critical. If you formed a team of 10 of me, first of all, it would be very boring. Second of all, it would be very old white male. And second of all, it would be very accountant. And that's not clever. So the trick is to pick people different to yourself. So in Life Healthcare's own delivery of diversity and inclusion, all we've said is you've got to hire someone who's different to you. Race, color, creeds, qualification. Then there's no restriction. You can go and hire anyone. Instead of trying to straitjacket what we think diversity looks like, rather just encourage it. And you know what ends up happening? That way around, the organization ends up starting to resemble society anyway. But you do it in a way that everyone feels that they're part of what's going on. And there's space for everyone. That way around, you can end up picking a great team. And if you pick a great team and you end up being the dumbest person in the team, you have done an incredible job. Because it's also a little bit like, it's like a little bit of voodoo. Because if someone comes in and they just see like really clever people, and the boss is not so clever, they turn around and say, whoa, he's got to have, or she's got to have something. and he or she's hiding it quite well. So never be scared to pick a great team. You've always got to be realistic. You have to be optimistic. Someone comes in with bad news, your hair goes on fire, and you say, oh, we're all going to die. What use is that? You've also got to be quite realistic. Oh, of course we can put out the burning building. Or like we don't have a hose pipe, we don't have a fire extinguisher. No, we'll just hope that it'll go away. That's also not reasonable. We couldn't hope that COVID would go away. We couldn't hope that the civil unrest would just dissipate. We couldn't hope that the computers would just switch themselves on. We couldn't hope that the president wouldn't sign the act. But we had to be optimistic that there were ways to be able to fix the problem. That was a bit of a slip, sorry. So by being realistic, you're also giving people hope. And by being optimistic, you're also showing that you believe that between the team and your capabilities as a leader, you'll get the job done. So what that then says is your enthusiasm goes through the organization. And exponential thinking allows people to think big. So when you've got big problems, you've got to be able to think big, because otherwise you're not going to be able to solve the problem. This is probably why being the dumbest person in the room helps, because then you need to think in simple things. You know, when someone comes with a really complicated problem, if you can make it simple, you can find a way to, in actual fact, convey the optimism and the realism. You can get the team on board, but take the time and effort to break it down into small pieces. Because if you can make it simple, you find out that it's actually the essence of getting the job done. Every big problem is a series of small solutions. And I think that the way that you can then do it is you speak in a language that people understand. There are no buzzwords and acronyms, and people walk out of the meeting and think, I don't understand the problem, and I definitely don't understand the solution. But what you can also do is, if you keep it simple, you can be firm. If you ask someone to do something that is tangible, that you can measure, that you all understand, you can hold them to account. If you ask them to do something fuzzy that you can't measure, when they don't get it done, you won't know they haven't got it done, and they don't know that they didn't even try. So keeping it simple is a real skill, because the clarity of purpose and the credibility that comes with it is absolutely key. And it also then makes the path of solution making enjoyable, because people understand what they're doing. There's nothing worse than giving someone a job and they don't know what to do. How did you go to sleep at night? Did you do a good job? Oh, I didn't even understand the question. Not nice. And that's the boss's responsibility. I've said this a little earlier on. You're going to have to get used to making decisions with 70% of the facts. That doesn't mean you guess. Well, I got to kind of like 70 and I tossed the coin and that's the decision I made. You have to know that you cannot make a decision with 40% of the facts. Then you're guessing. Oh, it was gut feel. It was instinct. That's fine when it works. But it's very, very hard to convince shareholders, your boss, your teams that you actually took a risk that you couldn't quantify and you guessed. But if you wait until 100% of the facts are available, then anyone can make the decision. Then it's easy. If someone had said to me, you know, COVID would actually just dissipate in 14 months, you wouldn't have had to make the decisions around resource allocation with the same speed. You said, oh, well, you know, we can just wait a year. It wouldn't have been a clever idea, but you would have then not have to have made the decision. You would have just relied on 100% of the facts and certainty. Sometimes you find that bosses just, well, come back with more information. Let's have another meeting. Let's form another committee. That doesn't work. Normally why they're doing that is they're too scared to make the decision. Make sure that you never fall into that trap, because asking for certainty, there comes a stage where all you're doing is you're trying to cover yourself, as opposed to actually really stepping up and making the call. And remember, you're smart people. So critical thinking is absolutely crucial. Show that you've applied your mind to the problem. Because if you're applying your mind, those around you are going to apply their minds. And if you get more people applying their minds, you get to a better answer. You might have more alternatives to consider, which puts you in a difficult position, but at least then you know that you've made the best effort that you can. Being the boss is lonely. It's not a popularity it's not popular. And as I said a little bit earlier on, the corner office, yes, you might get a nice couch and a fridge and, you know, people running around serving you tea, but it's lonely. And you've got to get used to the fact. But there are ways of overcoming it. You know, you get to the people. So I visit the hospitals. I'm a nightmare. I don't know the difference between a stethoscope and a syringe. But they're humans that are doing the work. And I'm curious and I'm interested to see what they're doing. And that the essence of leadership is you make tough decisions. Of course, that's why you get paid the money that you get paid as a boss. But you also do it in a way that encourages people to be part of the journey. So that collaboration, corporate culture, and inclusion is an important way of showing people that they're important. Yeah, and that they are the vital cogs in the machine, and you just happen to be the person who's the steward. Now, I've said the serious stuff. I love my job. I've always loved my job, because you find ways of not only getting the work done, but you also find ways of having fun in the way that you get it done. So it's a little bit about making sure that you have the balance in your life. Now, be careful of this. Your generation, which is, I don't know, 2 decades, 3 decades younger than my generation, I was taught, if you want to make real headway in an organization, you get given a job, you put your head down, and you work for 3 years, and then you have a look. Your generation thinks differently. I probably only have 5 jobs in my entire life. 5. You'll have 5 before you get to 40. And that's just the way the world has changed. And I'm not suggesting, well, hang on a minute, what I did was right and what you did is not right. I'm suggesting the world's shifted. But in the context of having work-life balance, one of my bosses, and I probably have to leave his name out of it because I didn't ask him if I could quote him. But I did sit in a meeting, and one of the younger generation was probably my generation, and was putting up and said to the boss, you know, I need more work-life balance. And the boss looked at him and said, in your particular instance, if you want work-life balance, you should have to work harder. And all the guy was actually asking for was actually to work less. But he wasn't the most energetic in the team. So what your balance in work life actually means, if you end up having a job that you don't enjoy, you can never get the right balance. Because if you think about the time that you spend on this earth, half of the time you'll spend sleeping. Yeah, 2/3 of what's left you'll spend working. And with the third you've got left, you've got to pick your partner. So if you've got an uncomfortable bed, a lousy job, and a horrible partner, I don't want your life. So picking the balance in your life is not just about working hard. Working hard is important. And as I said in my interview with Lincoln earlier today, I had to work hard. It didn't just fall in my lap. So if you're not prepared to work hard, be prepared to come second, third, or fourth in any race that you choose. But if you are working hard, be realistic. I sit in a healthcare company where wellness is a very, very important part of a leader's responsibilities. So there are things that I've done fortuitously because I'm the son of a nurse, where I took good care of myself for a long time. So I went for executive medicals starting at the age of 29. How many? I won't embarrass you. Not all of you have been for medical. And you must go. And I was raised by 7 women. Women need to take care of their health, as do men. But there's a pressing need to make sure that you do go for your visits. It's absolutely critical. You don't put them off. And all too often men they don't want to suffer the indignity of the examinations that they have to go through. Doesn't end well. So you have to make sure you take care of your health, your nutrition, your exercise, your sleep. Get dialed in, because you end up being an athlete. As a leader, you are an athlete. You cannot arrive at work with a lesser version of yourself and expect to perform. You arrive at work with a hangover, you're not going to do a good job. You arrive at work, you haven't slept properly. Trust me, your brain's not going to work properly. You arrive at work hungry, you're not going to function properly. You get hangry and you do silly things. So dialing yourself in here is important. Yeah, you want to get picked for the team, you've got to do the work. Don't try and kill yourself in the job. You don't get prizes for that. And if at the end of the day you think you're going to end up making more money and be careful, because money is not going to give you the satisfaction that you all think it will. It will be the single biggest disappointment you have in your job. Trust me. And you look at me now, write it down, write it down, write it down, and come back to me in 30 years' time. Because there's and this is not quite on the leadership topic, but it's something worth thinking about. I've got real experience having watched people not know how to deal with money in their jobs. And it's really interesting. I'll give you a good example and keep the names out of it. 2 individuals, both doing particularly well. Let's assume they were both earning 100,000. You call both of them in and you say, salary increase for both of you in front of each other. Both of you now going to get 150,000 a month. What do you think happens when they go home? They've now got a 50% increase. Talk at home, they change schools, they buy a new car, they buy a new house. All of a sudden, 150 is not enough. So they've gone from 100 to 150, but it's not enough. So the satisfaction is temporary because you start to fill your life by being able to spend the money, and it doesn't give you the freedom and the flexibility you're looking for. Now I make it worse. Of those two individuals, you both went from 100 to 150 and you both were ecstatic. I call Jane in and I say, look, 150, actually 200. Don't tell John. What does Jane do? Jane goes home. Now she's gone from 100 to 200 and things change, but she happens to leave a payslip on the photocopy machine. Oh, photocopies. Do you guys even have those? Oh. Fax machine. And John finds out. Now what happens? John goes back to his wife and says, you know, I can't believe it. Jane's getting 200 and they only gave me 150. Wife says, but you know, you went up by 50%. How can that possibly not be a good thing? Yeah, but she got 100. And in so doing, just remember that if you can manage money and you can be seriously clever about how you respond to money problems, you'll make your life much, much simpler. That wasn't on the slide, but it was important. You've got to spend time with your family. You have to take leave. If you don't take leave, you're not an athlete. You've got to rest. Otherwise, what ends up happening, you just get sick and you get useless. And that's no good. And you've got to surround yourself with people who take their job seriously, but not themselves. And in so doing, if you put that recipe all together and everything that I've said, and you manage to tick the boxes through the rest of your careers, I promise you, remember this, that great leadership is you get ordinary people to achieve extraordinary results. And you know what? We're all ordinary people. But when you watch them come together and deliver something spectacular, it's leadership that gets us there. And if you think about, I'm a passionate supporter of the rugby team. If you think about the essence of what's been created in that rugby team that's done so well, diversity, but great leadership. CEO on the field, Rassie as the coach, we've ended up in an environment where they've achieved extraordinary things. But think of the backgrounds that they come from. Some come from very poor backgrounds, some come from very rich backgrounds, but they all end up delivering the result. You can deliver the same in the environments that you create. But remember, as the boss, it's up to you. Be responsible and get it done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. So we're gonna get into our Q&A session. We've got about 15 minutes for questions, guys. Maybe I see you, my lady. Thank you, noted. So maybe just to kick off the Q&A, I did ask you this question before, but I really believe that it's important for the leaders in the room to hear your answer. So I asked Pete, because he's got global exposure, like he told you in Deutsche Bank, you're in 122 countries, right? So I asked Pete the other day, in having global experience, where, and maybe you can all close your eyes so you don't see his shirt, where is his favorite country to work in? And he gave it away today and came with this South African shirt. But he was honest that in all the countries he's worked in, South Africa was the best. And I felt today it's important for you to tell young leaders why you believe South Africa's got what it takes.
Sure. And yeah, I wear my heart on my shirt. It's an important moment for me because this country gave me everything I got. But it also gave me opportunities. I've been to 83 countries. So I didn't get to all 122. And I've had the chance to live overseas and experience what that world is like as well. So I can say to you, anyone who thinks that leaving South Africa to go and work overseas is better than staying, they're either lying or they haven't tried it. It's hard. It really is hard. And if you think about the way the world works, if it was that easy to go and live and work in London, everyone would go and everyone would stay. It's tough. New York's tough. Hong Kong's tough. Sydney's tough. And the people that are there are not just going to step back and say, hey, you from South Africa, let's just make it easy for you. Every country's got its challenges. London's got its potholes. Every country's got its taxes. Every country's got its government that is slightly in disarray. You think of what's going on, well, some of you would have watched the presidential debate in America. Think, well, best two they can pick. Someone would have watched the deliberations that are happening in the UK. The shift from the Conservatives to Labour is a massive change. French Prime Minister wakes up and says, oh, I'm a bit vulnerable, let's have an election. There's no country that can give us certainty against challenges. But you can surround yourself with people that you like. And you know what? We're nice people. And we've got challenges, lots of them. But we've also got resources and resourcefulness that can make a difference. There was a time in the 1960s where we were the 4th wealthiest country in the world. There or thereabouts. And it was off the back of mining and obviously commodities and. This country does plenty of stuff. First open heart transplant ever. You think about where we were with nuclear and Pelindaba. There are plenty of things, and we just keep going, of successes that South Africans have delivered. So there's something that sits here that's magical. That's why I came back.
Hello. Thank you so much, Pete, for that. Sorry, I was very enthusiastic because I'm in the healthcare. So undergrad, I'm a medical doctor, and 2020 was tough. I think that 3 years was what made me to leave clinical medicine altogether. I remember Christmas, 25th of December, 2022, within the space of 12 hours, I had 3 patients die. And it really takes something from you. So I just wanted to ask you, just to add in the first, we also had the first penile transplant in South Africa and was successful. Yeah, sorry. So also, I just wanted to ask, when we're talking about healthcare, the NHI is really becoming topic. And no matter whoever says what, it's here, it's law. It's now, how do we face it? So in the backdrop of having been in the healthcare industry, health is expensive. Health is expensive. For you to be healthy, it's expensive. How do you find that being a banker and coming to a space where it is so frizzly? I always say with engineers, they're very much on absolutes. And with health, there's so many gray lines. You can never say that this test is going to be 100% because there's so many variables. And also, then how do we try and give affordable healthcare? I know it sounds difficult,
No, sure.
but like how do we give affordable healthcare? Because there are lots of technologies on home-based care and technology of, especially with COVID, doctors, the telemedicine. And I think the second part is just to ask, what did you guys do for your group? Because what we also find was trying to encourage healthcare workers during that time. And I know the government has since given a rebate in terms of leave, something like 5 days leave currently that's going on. So what has the Live Healthcare Group done for the employees that were affected by COVID? Thanks.
Sure. No, so I think the first thing around healthcare is expensive. Completely agree. And it's a combination of a whole series of things. If we just go start with the NHI, yes, it's been signed into law, but it's also gone to court. Because there are elements of it that are considered unconstitutional. You qualify as a doctor, you qualify as a specialist, and someone in Pretoria is going to tell you where you can work. Not give you a range of possibilities. You qualify as a neurologist, you go into Limpopo. Oh, but hang on, I spent 16 years doing my work. And now you're telling me where to go. Yes, that's the law. I'm not so sure that that's constitutionally fair. So that certificate of need is being contested. I think the basis on which our input into the process over many years got completely ignored. So we as a company have said affordable, accessible healthcare for South Africans. We completely support it. What human would not? What company would not? But there are ways and means of getting to that answer. And the way they're proposing to do it in the NHI we think is unimplementable and is doomed to fail. So in the context of service delivery, let's get back to what healthcare really means. My banking experience gave me an interesting example when the Financial Sector Charter in late 90s put us under pressure to deliver affordable, accessible banking to South Africans. We delivered Mzansi. And ATMs everyone had to be within 15 kilometers of an ATM, if I remember correctly. And we had to design a product that was accessible to all. So the 4 banks and the central bank got together and they made a plan. Why is that important? The central bank, government, the 4 big banks, private, got together and made a plan. So the context that we're advocating from a life healthcare perspective is the government's had responsibility for delivering healthcare for the last 30 years. They've got far more hospitals than private. But if you had a choice at this particular juncture as to your service provider, you've all got in your back of your minds where you'd go to. Let's get down to basics. Where are the nurses? We need more nurses. Where are the doctors? Because if we want to improve coverage and access, we need more doctors. And these big hospitals that we've already got in this country, we need more hospital managers that can manage them. Charlotte Matheke is not the hospital that it was 30 years ago. Why? Livingston Hospital in Eastern Cape is not the hospital it was 30 years ago. Why? Management, leadership. So I don't think when we talk about the NHI, we haven't spoken about the practicalities. Everyone's spoken about, well, it's just another funding mechanism. Well, I don't think sending 600 billion through one government department is the right answer. Because that's what they would effectively have to do. They have to take the funding out of the provinces and put it all in Pretoria, and everything gets done in one place. I don't think it's the right answer. So our personal views, collaboration between public and private is important. And it's in essence so we can hear one another and make a valuable contribution to delivering improved care. One way we deliver cheaper care, we stop wasting money. There's wastage in the system. That needs to stop. If we stop wasting money and we manage to get technologies to help us make care more accessible, I think we'll achieve both answers. So in the context of the problem we're really trying to solve, this is not about knee replacements and heart surgery and expensive neurology. This is about delivering primary care in the inaccessible parts of our country, principally at the level of nurse-led, clinic-driven, and more specifically, from my passion and perspective, is around maternity. That's where this really needs to change. And it's not about the big hospitals in the urban areas. This is about the proliferation into the rural areas. So in the context of how we've seen our contribution to the process, we speak out, we have a plan, we want to engage. In the context of how we protect our business, is we won't just adopt instructions that put our businesses at risk, and we won't do anything that compromises our doctors or our nurses. Because with no doctors and no nurses, we've got no business. So if we think something is unconstitutional or flies in the face of the way the business should be run, of course we'll stand our ground. In the context of how we looked after our employees during COVID and what we did for them during COVID, the list is from here to the wall and back again. Circumstance specific, leave or care for the bereaved of the family. Life Healthcare is a very caring organization. And the humanness that comes with basically staff collecting money amongst each other to support those families that really struggled as a result of bereavement or inability to work and so on. The legends that have been told inside the company, which are heartwarming in the extreme.
Hi, Peter. My name is Desmond Jr. I just wanted to find out, what advice do you have for someone who's looking to make a career transition, right, in search for career growth? I hope my question is...
No.
Yeah.
So I had career transition imposed upon me. I retired. And after 2 months of spectacular retirement, my wife, Sarah, said, and find a job. So there was motivation. I think the context, if I go back and think about my own personal transition, it was about doing something I was passionate about. And my mom has always said to me, if I wasn't an accountant, I would have become a doctor. So it's interesting to find that out 40 years later. I think you've got to be curious. You've got to do your homework, and you've got to follow an institution or a boss for it to become really fulfilling. And don't worry about the money. And be careful, be careful. I know I'm seated here in a school of learning. Be careful of blindly just suggesting that if you go and get another qualification, that transition is going to happen. I've seen lots of people get disappointed by middle management moments where they think by going to study, they're going to get a better answer. They don't understand themselves. So look in the mirror, understand yourself, understand what makes you tick, understand what will make you happy. Find a boss or an institution that can match that. And that's how you're going to get your answer.
I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice. Ideally, I should be in the business of care, right? But I have a very strong interest in business. And I find it very incredibly hard as a Black clinical psychologist to service, particularly the Black community where mental health is an issue. And obviously, to pay a psychologist 1.5 a session is a big deal. And to then still pay a psychiatrist, then still have to go to pharmacy to get your antidepressants and all of that. So how do you navigate the balance between the work of care, like you are in the work of care, and your business acumen? At the end of the day, passion is needed, but in private practice, you have to make money. So how do you
Brilliant.
balance work and having to make money?
Brilliant. And I think you might have intercepted one of the emails I had with our board. Profit and healthcare are very uncomfortable words to have in the same sentence. The way that Life Healthcare addressed the matter in COVID, we said it didn't matter what the financial consequences were, you put the patient first. We lost money. For a healthcare company to lose money, that takes some doing. But we put the patients and the citizens of South Africa ahead of the needs of shareholders. In COVID, it was a crisis. In the context of how we need to now balance it in a sustainable organization, because if Life Healthcare makes a loss and we go out of business, hospitals shut. That's the reality. So you need to get a fair return. You can't have an excessive return. In the context of how you then manage it, in the case of mental health, Life in Khanyisa is in large-scale public-private partnerships, nearly 3,000 beds, and the going rate per day is orders of magnitude about 700 per bed per day, which is, in the context of delivering high-quality care, it's certainly affordable and certainly finds favor with government. And that's how we've also got to make sure that we can deliver it. So our reasonable requests are that we are a responsible institution and we're not looking for excessive returns. That way around, we can keep shareholders happy so that the money stays behind us, but we can also do our very best to try and make sure that people can afford the care on a continuing basis. And it's a tough ask. Yeah, it's very, very finely balanced, and it's probably the most difficult part of my job.
Firstly, it's a compliment to arrive to my question. I think I compliment the shirt you wore, and also to actually tell us that South Africa is the best place to be. I think we're not hearing that often, especially on social media. And having it say that, I happened to be in the medical sector during COVID. I was in the supply chain, supplying to the private hospitals. And it was a very difficult time. So also another compliment on the crisis management that you guys did. Now, to arrive to my question, you spoke about the love for South Africa and how you came back and you think this is the best place. I think for the most of my network that I gained in the medical sector has left South Africa. Some are going to Saudi Arabia as nurses. Some are going to the UK. I've got a couple of my friends who have left, who I feel were very great people to have in South Africa. And what I would like to ask you is what could be done, or what is being done to make sure that we retain the talent, the native talent that we have, because social media is not speaking the great things that you have said. So what could we do to make sure that we retain talent for the next decade or the next generation? Thank you.
Life Healthcare lost 143 specialists in the 12 months to the end of September. How many of those were immigrations? So 143, some went to competitors, some retired, some passed away regrettably. Of the 143, how many were immigrations? 80%. So call that 85, we'll call that nearly 100. 100? 120. So I've got bids at 120. Are those 60? I've got 60. Do I hear a lower number? Do I hear a lower number? 7. So don't believe everything that you read. Our specialists are not flying out of this country. It's not true. 7 left out of Life Healthcare. We're a third of the market. So maybe let's call it 25, 30. This is not a moment in time where our specialists are leaving. That's not our problem. Our problem is, how do we encourage younger people to want to become specialists? That's the challenge. So our emphasis has got to be on training. When we talk about retention, we had a surplus of doctors in January, February who hadn't been placed by the National Department of Health. Why? Because we weren't allowed to train them. So we are strong advocates inside the country for allow us to train more nurses, please, sir. Allow us to have the capacity to train specialists on the private platform. Because at the moment, specialist training only happens in public. And then you've got resourcing and funding and getting in the way of encouraging young South Africans to stay here as specialists. Private's got a role to play. What are we doing about it? We're saying a lot. We put money behind the training of specialists in the various guises that we can have, and we want to play a bigger role. So it's not all doom and gloom. Don't believe everything you read on social media. And I can't speak for Netcare and Mediclinic's numbers. I can just tell you what happened to ours because we published them. So we don't have this constant flight of specialists into other places to work. They also know, they're smart people. They also understand working in private in South Africa and working in public in South Africa. Great places for specialists to work. The variety of work they get, the environment in which they work, don't knock it. You want to trade this to go and work in the NHS? Have a go. Not so easy. So hopefully that number has put, put your minds at rest.
Thank you. I was going to say, one of my questions was how you reconcile social justice, which you speak very greatly about, and the business of profit. And I think you've answered that very well. So well done to you to that. And I think my bigger question is, coming in as a leader in those 4 years where so much was happening, how did you, or where did you draw the courage to lead in an unfamiliar, new environment, and to try to do that to the best of your ability with sometimes only 70% of the information?
So I think that in the context of discovering your own strengths, I've never been scared to take on a challenge. I think it's one of those moments where when you've been given lots of things in life, you've got lots expected of you. And I think I've been very fortunate with the people that I've been exposed to, a loving mom. That's how you do it.
Thank you. On behalf of the foundation, we want to thank you so much for your lessons. And I know that someone has learned something today. Thank you so much.
It's very kind. Thank you.